This is the inside of a HP 200A, and it changed the world. It was a tool for testing sound equipment, and it was made here in this garage, which is now a landmark recognized as the birthplace of Silicon Valley. The 200A was based on the work Bill Hewlett did for his master's thesis, and the manufacturing plant was David Packard's garage. The 200A was then custom modified into a 200B for their first customer, Walt Disney. They sold 8 of these 200Bs, which were named that way so they could hide the fact that they had no other products, to the Walt Disney Company to be used in the making of Fantasia in 1939, which was enough for them to start a company, flipping a coin to decide if it was going to be called Hewlett-Packard or Packard-Hewlett. HP has a long and rich history. This video isn't about Hewlett-Packard. It's about another company that I just bet $1,000 on and is kind of like the grandchild of HP. In 1999, they took a chunk of their company and turned it into a new company called Agilent. Then in 2014, Agilent split itself into a life science company that's still called Agilent and a tech company called Keysight Technologies, which is now fairly massive and complicated. I want to take you through the journey I went through to get to the point where I felt like I understood the company well enough to make an investment without needing to understand what an oscilloscope is or have anything close to a degree in electrical engineering. Some of the ideas we're going to use to triangulate this beast of a business are shrimp farming, lottery winners, and why there are so many kinds of doctors. The origin story of Keysight does start with the HP 200A, but there's a lot of turns along the way. In fact, I'm pretty convinced that Bill and David were just ahead of their time, not just in the technology, but in the industry they selected. See, the 200A as a product fits under a category called test and measurement, which is basically the making of tools that check whether or not other tools are working properly. A simple version of this is a ruler. You might use a ruler to measure something, but how did the ruler factory know exactly where to put the lines? You need an even more accurate tool. Otherwise, any two rulers wouldn't be the same, and anything you make with them would end up totally off. This market has grown a lot over time, to the point where it's the main thing Keysight does. But when you're starting a company, you can't be too picky about the work you take. So HP ended up going into a lot of different directions before ending up being the computer printer making company that we know them as today. I'm going to explain more about why test and measurement is such a great industry in a minute. But first, why did it take so long? How did we end up with Keysight some 70 years after the 200A was made? What was the problem? Well, believe it or not, a big issue that comes up sometimes is that a company can make too much money. Bad things tend to happen when the amount of money you make is greater than your ability to put it to good use. Think of someone that wins the lottery. There's no real merit behind their earnings, so they don't know how to use their newfound wealth, and something like 70% of them end up going broke. The same thing can happen with companies. I mean, at one point, the Coca-Cola company was investing in shrimp farms. The tricky part is that it's really hard to tell what a good investment looks like beforehand. This is one of the main points in one of my favorite books, The Innovator's Dilemma, where the author shows that a good company has to address the needs of their customers in order to grow, but because there's a lag in the development of technology, the company will almost always overshoot at some point, because by the time they finish what they're working on, the customer actually needs something else. And this is why I think the test and measurement business is such a good one. It has a loophole. Keysight is much less likely to overshoot because the technology they make is there to support the technology of their customers. When a university or company is on the cutting edge of technology, but they don't have a way to measure the thing they're working on, Keysight builds them a tool. If someone is going to overshoot, it's going to be Keysight's customers rather than Keysight themselves. But this doesn't explain why it took so long. If test and measurement is such a good business, why didn't HP just do that the whole time? Well, I'm not sure they could have. I think technology might just not have been complicated enough in the 1940s. There's a specialization phenomenon that just takes time. The more we know about a complicated field like medicine or technology, the more specific the information any one person needs to know. So we get more and more experts in narrower and narrower fields. Think of the number of different kinds of doctors there were in the 1940s when HP was starting versus the number there are today. Those generalists didn't need that many tools, and the tools they did need weren't that complicated. But now I think the time is finally right. The world is covered in new and complicated technologies like smartphones, AI, wireless networks, cloud computing, virtual reality, and robotics, all of which have physical components that are pushing the boundaries of physics as we know it, which means they'll need more and more sophisticated measurement tools. And if you think AI doesn't have a physical component, ask yourself, where does all the data it needs come from? This also solves the too much money problem we mentioned earlier, since it's unlikely that Keysight runs out of sensible directions to invest in anytime soon. And you can see all of this in the financials. Keysight has established a track record of solid returns on equity without using much debt. For all of these reasons, we bought $1,000.54 of Keysight Technology stock at $133 a share. If you're a subscriber, then you know that this video is part of a challenge series where I'm investing $1,000 into a different company for each letter of the alphabet to end up with a $26,000 portfolio in a year. We're now up to $11,000, and here are the results so far.